It's that time of year again, talking about cap casualties for the Minnesota Vikings. 4 names that I'm going to bring up, 2 of which I have no doubt I would be shocked if they aren't cut. Another 2 that on the surface it makes sense, but you got to weigh the pros and cons. And 1 honorable mention that I'm sure will be brought up, if not already, but it actually does more harm than good cap-wise. Certainly more harm than the little performance that we get from him. The most obvious name, the most savings. First off, over the cap has the Vikings with $36.4 million available, but the most obvious name that will release the most savings is Harrison Smith. You free up an additional $11.4 million in cap, and I thought that after the Carolina game where he had one of the best single game performances of his career, I thought, okay, Hitman, he's back. He's found that second win. Unfortunately, it wasn't the same the rest of the 2023 season, and we have to be careful not to allow recency bias of what we've seen from Hitman the last 2 years, allow that to cloud what we've seen for the entirety, the majority of his career. One of the best safeties of his era, a quiet guy combined with the fact that he plays in a smaller market compared to, say, LA or New York, etc., playing in the shadows behind Eric Berry, Earl Thomas, Tyrann Mathieu, Jesse Bates. 2-time All-Pro safety. I think that's ridiculous. I think he deserved more. But this man, and it's funny because I think a week ago I mentioned how this will certainly come to pass, the eventual release of Harrison Smith, and how he 22, the purple home jersey, that's the only Vikings jersey that I have. And I see the comedy in that because while saying that, literally behind me is a jersey of Randy Moss. So let me clarify and say that the 22 home jersey is the only jersey that I have and will wear. Whereas the Moss jersey, signed Randy Moss jersey behind me, that I don't even see that as a jersey. That's more of a trophy, but I digress. One of the best Vikings players of all time, no doubt. Unfortunately, it's going to come to an end, whether he retires altogether or plays somewhere else. Second player, Dean Lowry, $2.2 million. You'll clear with that. It was a bad signing from the jump. Packers fans were super excited when they moved on from him. Never understood that from the beginning, but that's an obvious cut that you have to make. Brian Asamoah. Now, this is a player that, first off, okay, second-year man out of Oklahoma. He played just 36 snaps on defense, so clearly he's in the doghouse. You save $911,000 in cap. This is one of those things where performance-wise, it makes sense to cut him. But then when you think about, you also have to replace that roster spot, the amount of money it's going to cost if you want another player, especially if you're going to lose Jordan Hicks. If you want another linebacker, that's going to cost you a little bit more. Doesn't necessarily make sense to cut Brian Asamoah. I get it, especially because he's a heavy special teams player. But I wouldn't be surprised if they were to go ahead and cut him. It's funny looking back, man. I made a whole last video last offseason talking about how, hey, Lewis Cine and Brian Asamoah, these 2 guys, they are going to absolutely kick ass under Brian Flores. And apparently Flores determined that these 2 players aren't worth my time. And lastly, Jaren Hall. You free up $775,000. You're going to draft a quarterback, whether it's in the first or the second round. KOC loves Nick Mullins, so that's 2 spots right there. And then if you bring back Kirk Cousins, that's game over for Jaren Hall because they're not going to carry 4 quarterbacks on the roster. So I would say the wild card here is Brian Asamoah, but I feel like Jaren Hall, it's his time in Minnesota is over. Hopefully he can pick up somewhere else. moving forward. Going from $36.4 million available in cap right now, according to Over the Cap, with these cuts, your new total is $51.6 million. You boost up by $15.3 million. Also, with these moves, you create an additional $27 million in cap in 2025. And going to the honorable mention player, I talked about him a little bit earlier, actually just not that long ago, Cine. I get it that this is an all-time bust. I became a Vikings fan in 2000, and to me, this is the biggest bust of all time for this organization. I understand he's taken up a well-deserved roster spot from somebody else, but actually, whether it's a pre-June 1st or post-June 1st cut, you actually incur more cap debt releasing him versus keeping him on the roster. So it actually does more harm than good to your cap to let him go. You might as well let his rookie contract play out. Once it's over with, okay, we'll see you on the other side. But I understand the frustration with him. Forget the 2022 draft class, or not just the 2022 draft class. That it really is an all-time bust outside of Ed Ingram and Ty Chandler. But the trade down from 12 to 32 is its own separate category where you didn't get equal value. You didn't get fair value. You should have gotten at least a first-round pick in 2023. And so it was a really bad trade. And then on top of that, selecting a player that didn't amount to anything, it's just super frustrating. But those are the four players: Harrison Smith, Dean Lowry, Brian Asamoah, and Jaren Hall. Two of them I know will get cut, Smith and Lowry. One, I'm pretty sure, Jaren Hall, and one that's a wild card in Brian Asamoah. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, or any additional players that you think I missed.